Hey Cougars, it's early May, and that means we're getting to the close of a school year, but it also means we're coming up on Mother's Day. And I always save this project for this time of year so we can get home with a handmade, a beautiful piece of artwork for your mom. Of course, if it took a little bit longer on the project, I'm sure your dad would love it too. All right, well, let's get going. Essentially what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a paper template, and we're gonna cut our pieces out from paper, and we're gonna use this as a template to cut out our pieces of copper. Now, one thing I really like about this project is that, of course, it's a lovely product in the end, but it's also something we're really gonna try to focus on using recycled copper for, right? We've got a lot of recycled copper in the shop. Some of them are repose pieces that weren't taken home, or maybe a first practice repose project that didn't quite work out. So we've got a lot of scrap copper. By recycling this material, we're keeping down costs. And it's also, to be quite honest, these roses look best when they have the copper itself is distressed or beaten up a little bit. It gets more places for light and shadow to create on the piece, and I think it just makes for a better project. So we'll be cutting out our templates, we'll be using recycled copper, and we'll be using the multi-purpose scissors to cut out our shapes. So here's a piece I found out of the scrap bin. Here's another one, looking good. There is some other metal in the scrap bin. This is the copper foil that we use to make our embossing projects, the greeting card and the shield. We don't want to use this material for the rose, right? This is, I'll tell you, during COVID, this was the best I could do, and I sent this home. But the roses made out of sheet copper are far more appealing, right? So let's make sure we're cutting out thick copper, and we'll leave the foil for the recycler. Okay, so we got some nice pieces of copper here, and I want to get this copper repose hammering out of here. I'm not going to get rid of all of it, but I'm going to flatten it on the forge or on the anvil. But we are going to use the forge, and we're going to heat it up and do one of my favorite processes in the shop, and that's anneal, which means heat up to red hot to make it soft. Right now, this piece is nice and soft, and I can bend it easily. But the center of this piece that's been hammered on is not very soft, right? It's been work hardened because it's been hammered on and worked, and that makes the metal stiff. So I'm going to go over there, I'm going to flatten this out, then we're going to heat it up to red hot. We'll let it cool down. We'll glue our template on, and we'll get to work on our flower. Let's head over to the forge. Okay, so I'm ready to turn on the forge. We're going to use it to heat up our metal, but I want you to take a peek inside, because we have a lot of copper that sadly has been dropped into the forge and has melted, right? This is going to heat up to over 2,500 degrees. That's enough to melt copper and actually burn it. So this, when we have this metal burnt at the bottom of the forge, it's a heavy load. It's hard on the heat bricks. So if it falls in, let me know. We'll try to get it out as fast as we can. But if it melts in there, we really want to avoid that. All right. So you really get a sense of how stiff this metal is. This corner that I didn't hammer on, I can still bend it. But this center piece, it's taking quite a bit of energy to give that little bend. So we got to heat this up, relieve those stresses in the metal, and make it soft. I'm using the long-handled tongs, and I have the Kevlar gloves on. You don't just want to, don't drop your piece in. We don't, the forge just turned on, so it's going to take a little bit to heat this up. But once this is hot, this is going to heat up your copper sheet in just moments. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. Nice and red hot. And I'm going to flip it around and do the other side so I know everything is nice and soft. I'm resting the tongs on the edge. Here it comes. Looking nice and red. I'm going to put this on the plate, not to flatten it out, but just to use that as a heat sink. That steel plate is going to pull the heat out of that copper lickety-split. I know a lot of times when we're annealing stuff, our instinct is to go right to the quench bucket, which works, but however, when you quench it, when you rapidly cool it, especially with steel and ferrous base, but also with copper, you're actually hardening it again. It gives it what's called a case hardening. So instead of cooling it in the water, I'm just going to put it on the steel plate and give it a few minutes to let that steel plate draw the heat out of the piece. It's only been on the plate a few minutes, and while it's still warm, it's definitely, I can handle it, but it's got all the mill scale on it, right? It's kind of dirty and it gets all over the place, so maybe quick wire brushing, or if you're really fastidious, a little bit of Scotch-Brite. Just knock that mill scale off of there. Keep your hands a little bit cleaner. Let's go back to the benches. All right, Cougars, I got my first few petals cut out here, and I want to really stress that cutting them out carefully, this is an important step, right? Cutting them out of copper is really important too, but we want a template that's really going to give us the flower. Make sure these edges are round. Don't cut those edges off. Come all the way inside. We're going to have to cut all the way down there in the copper. All right? So I got my piece of copper. It's nice and soft. I'm going to take my flower, just using favorite school product, glue stick. Notice I'm sticking it as close to the corner as possible. I want to use as much of this material, right? This is about using everything you need but no extra, right? Everything I cut off of here is going to go into the scrap bucket. Now, I'm going to start off by cutting the whole round shape out, and then I will take my time to cut to the inside. The closer you are to the fulcrum, that is the pivot point of the scissors, the stronger the cut is going to be. So when I'm cutting, I'm going to try to cut down here and not at the tip. I'm going to cut all the way down, but I'm not going to try to make that turn. That's too tight a turn. Come from the other side. Pop that out of there, but I need to trim it a little better. I see a lot of copper still on the side there. Pays off to make careful cuts. Now I'm going to cut out the whole flower, but it's also, we got to poke a hole for our stem to come through. So I'm going to use this hole punch. You can see I'm centering it on my hole. All right. All right. We're looking good, but I want to get these texture lines on my piece of copper, on my petals. It really adds to the piece. So I'm going to head back to the forge area. I'm going to distress or texturize the petals of the leaf. And then, because I'm beating it up and making it hard again, my next step is going to be to soften it so we can bend this piece into nesting cups where I can line up my center hole. Right, so there's going to be a lot of small bending going on. We're going to need to keep our copper nice and soft. Let's go distress and anneal. Okay, so I'm over back here at the forge, and I've got two chipping hammers. You'll notice this one I've ground down. It's got I wouldn't say a sharp edge, but it's got a narrow edge. This one that's been working away chipping slag all day, it's got a much thicker edge to it. I'm going to use a thin edge. And I'm not trying to beat this up. I'm trying to give it some texture. I'm going to keep the lines in line with the radiating out of the center of the rose, and I'm going to make sure I really get some good texture at the edges. Trying to keep the marks even. All right, it's just giving us some places to catch some shadows and some highlights. Beat up my metal, so once again it's hard to bend. We're going to anneal it and get back over there. Keeping my tongs rested on the edge of the forge. I've got my Kevlar gloves on. Looking for red hot. All right, give it a minute. All right, petals out of the forge. I'm going to knock off that scale and keep my hands clean-ish. All right, so the next step, we're going to make this, we're going to have these petals nest together. And I want to start, I usually start with my smallest one, but I'm going to start with this big one. And I'm going to make it into sort of a tight bud like this. And then I'm going to open it up a little bit, right? But it's important to do the tight bud first and then open so you can get these pieces to rest right on top of each other. So when we do the final step of applying epoxy glue, we have a good surface to surface contact. Okay. So I got my needle nose pliers. And I'm going to start by just folding one side in. We're only curving one side of each petal here, as shown in this image. And then I'm going to start to bend these up. I don't want to go too far too fast. Right? So I'm getting it to bend up into a cup. Right? But what I'm seeing right now, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside. So I've got a nice curve here, but this part is still pretty straight. So I'm going to try to curve it a little bit more, but keep it on the outside. Curve it a little bit more, keep it on the outside. Curve it a little bit more, keep it on the outside. Right. Curve it a little more. Roses are round. So let's make sure that we're getting that cup nice and round. All right, so that was the biggest one. I'm going to go to the next size. I've got one cut out right here. And I'm going to do that same thing again. And this one has already been bent a little bit, so the metal's a little bit stiffer. Still pretty bendable. One go to the inside. And we fold up, 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 up. Get rid of those straight edges and kind of make it round. I'm not sure that one's going to fit in. This one. I want to make sure that I'm getting the bottom of this second petal touching the top of this larger petal. All right, and I can see I might have to cut this one a little bit deeper to get it a little closer. All right, so we're going to continue that operation, one inside of the other, starting with the tight bud, and then once they're all stacked up, I'm going to fold it out and make for that open rose flower that's is sharing its beauty with the whole world. All right, I've got my petals nicely lined up, bottom's touching bottom. I can see through my stem hole the whole way, right? So now it's time to cut a piece of copper wire. We're going to strip the plastic from it. So don't use the scissors when you're cutting the copper wire. Be sure to use a pair of pliers, either the dikes or the needle nose with the cutting area. Now I want to strip this plastic off, but when we're using the mat knife, I want you to hold the knife still and move the material. So I'm going to hold the knife against the edge of the plastic, and I'm not sliding the knife, I'm pulling the wire. A little bit safer, right? And once you get off a nice strip, get off that plastic insulation. All right, we stripped the wire. Now let's give it a twist. So annoying. Why do they? Somebody was playing Quien es más macho by tightening down the vise as tightly as possible. Let me assure you, you can break a tool like this. And right now, I cannot loosen this up. So what I'm going to do is slip a pipe on it, increase the lever arm, and give myself a little more leverage as I loosen this piece. Oh my God. Right. No need to tighten it down that much. All right, but now I got my wire. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half, but not quite perfectly in half. I want to leave about a ½ inch longer on one side. Well, that might be a little bit less. A little bit longer on one side. I'm going to take this side and I'm going to put it in the vise. So, keyless chuck, I can tighten or loosen. This is a drill, but it is also a driver. That is to drive screws. So I want to set the clutch onto drill. So this is going to straighten the wire, but it's also going to twist it. So I'm going to hold some tension on my drill and twist my wire. That's a pretty nice looking twist. I'm going to a little bit tighter, holding tension on my drill. You could go tighter, but I'm not going to. I like that amount of twist myself. All right, and you can see on this rose I have the flower, or the leaf that's below it. I've also got this, I think this is called the cotyledon. That's the part, that green bud that opens up first. You can see that on there. All right, I'm getting my pieces nested up here. Got a nice connection there. This one I'm going to have to close up a little bit more. Stella. Good girl. Good girl. Right, I got my bottoms touching. It's not looking so great. Nice connection. Get my tight bud right in the middle. Let me open this one up a little bit. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about this flower. Opened up at the outside and a little bit tighter bud on the inside. So I got my wire. We're going to nest these pieces all together, making sure we got some good surface contact. Right, it's going to sit at the bottom. I'm going to bend this one back. Maybe I'll just open this one up a little bit. All right. Now I want to bend this wire to it this side so I get a good connection between the petal and the stem. There'll be a nice connection, solid physical touching so the glue can hold it together. But I'm going to have trouble because this one is so tight. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to bend it here. Trying to bend that over at something like a 90 degrees. I'm going to slip it on there. Got a little farther to go. Let me see if I can get that a little tighter down. All right, now if I pull it tight, you can see that the stem, or the inside of the stem, is touching the inside of the first bud. And I'm going to bend this one down, so this is going to hold on that. Right, gravity is going to hold it in place when the epoxy is drying. So I'm going to make a little hook on the end. I've got the green part of the bud is at the bottom. So I'm going to mix up some 2-part epoxy. I'm going to apply it right in there with just a dot. Then I'm going to flip this over. That little hook is holding it in place. I'll put a little epoxy underneath this part, one of these sides, and then I will hang it up on the cabinet for about 10 minutes. That'll take the glue to set up. All right, so we've got our JB Weld, or it's a 2-part quick set epoxy. This stuff is it's gross, right? It's nasty chemicals, so I want you to be really mindful. Keep it off your hands, even though I just got it on mine. You're going to squeeze it out with the syringe, and we usually do this in groups. So we make a larger batch. So it should measure it out equally as it comes out, and that's looking pretty good. I'm going to put the cap back on right away. You really want to mix it well, right? One part is the epoxy, and the other is the accelerator. It's what's going to get it to cure. If you don't mix it up well, it will not set up, it won't harden and hold your piece, and it'll stay icky and gross. Epoxy smells bad, just a heads up. All right, and this is a reason I like to do more than one at a time, because when you squeeze it out of the syringe, it just gives you a little more than you're going to need. I'm going to go in there just with a dot. I don't need much. But I'm going to make sure that I'm getting it both on the stem and on the bottom of the flower. I really try to aim for that hole where we put the wire through. So it doesn't take very much. I know I got that piece holding it in place. That sort of hook shape I made in there. Coming underneath. So I know I have some good surface-to-surface contact there. Now all these roses look exactly alike, so I think it's a good idea, especially when you're done, is to mark it. I'm going to write my name on a piece of tape, attach it to my stem. So at the end of class, it actually is going to take about, maybe it's 5-minute epoxy, but I'll give it 10 or 15 minutes, make sure it's set up nicely. My piece will be done. I will take a picture, to upload to my Google Drive portfolio, and then I think I'll give it to my mom for Mother's Day. All right, Cougars. I'll see you next time.